Hi, welcome to Alberni Thrive. I'm Alicia LaRue.
And I'm Eric Plummer.
And today we will be talking about the possibility of a secondary highway and current hazards on our existing highway, Highway 4, to get into Port Alberni. I find it's a really exciting time to be part of Port Alberni. Lots of really neat things happening right now.
There's this critical period that Port Alberni is going through right now where it's trying to rediscover itself. And there's a lot of discussion about what works for Port Alberni, what's great about Port Alberni, what needs to be changed in Port Alberni.
Welcome back.
Today we're going to be talking about highway access to the Alberni Valley. So for many locals it's a scenic journey over the hump, but for those who okay.
Keep going.
But for those who don't live in the community, the Highway 4 is a white-knuckled, winding mountain pass that is often challenging for people. Today we're going to be talking about the Alberni Valley's only land access, how this has affected the community's development, and what could be done in the future to improve upon this well-traveled route. We're very lucky to be joined by City Councillor Jack McClellan, former Mayor Gillian Trumper and former MLA, and City Councillor Ron Paulson. Thanks very much for joining us today, everybody.
Thank you.
So I want to start out talking about Cathedral Grove and safety in Cathedral Grove. Now, every summer this becomes an issue. It was particularly an issue last summer, I believe. We're seeing a packed parking lot, and we're seeing cars lining both sides of the road with families going back and forth. Gillian, has this always been a safety concern in Cathedral Grove, or has it intensified in recent years?
It's always been a safety issue, as long as I've been around. It's always been a bottleneck and a worry, and every year there's some sort of accident. Whether it's a fender bender or whether it's more serious, and things have been tried to help the situation down there with, and I've run into problems when trying to look at areas for increasing the parking there for starters. But it's a highway, and the traffic that comes through there is horrendous when you think of them winding through that bottleneck at that particular spot.
I'd like to touch on a little bit about what could be done about this issue and some initiatives that have happened in the past. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in 2001 the provincial government announced plans for a parking lot in Cathedral Grove, but that ran into a considerable amount of opposition. Do you think this is a possibility again? And I'm wondering if sentiments have changed over the last 15 years.
Oh, well, I think a parking lot could be put in, but I think there's a bigger issue, that the amount of traffic that's going through there. I mean, there's more traffic on that highway than there is that goes between Courtenay and Qualicum if you drive that particular highway. And so something needs to be done to get the heavy traffic off that particular highway so that it can become, as happens in many places, you have the scenic drive and local traffic, and you get all the heavy industrial vehicles and business off onto another faster, better road.
Now, whose problem is it? But I mean, Cathedral Grove isn't even in our isn't it? I believe that it's part of Nanaimo's municipality. Yes. So why is it falling on our kind of or because?
Well, it falls
Jack?
on us simply because we're the ones that are trapped
Yeah.
on this side of what you can really call a spur line. And the rail lines, when they got a spur line, you got to go up, you got to go back. A logging road that's a spur line, you go up and you come back. There's nowhere to go once you get there. And that's the problem we've got here. One of the problems is that the traffic doubles. Any commercial traffic that comes here has no other place to go but back to Parksville. So it doubles up the traffic on Highway 4 through Cathedral Grove, around Cameron Lake, and it also affects our economy. During the 80s, I was in business because the mills were shut down. It was during the big depression area that actually hit British Columbia for the first time. And we had to get steel in. My partner and I were making things out of mild steel and sheet metal. And the trucks didn't want to come very often because we're going out empty. So we don't want to come to Port Alberni, and it's still a problem where people are coming in, and so it's a double cost. If they could come to Port Alberni and then go up to Courtenay, Comox, and then back down, there's a circle route. So that's a big problem. It doubles the traffic for tourism, because tourists, when I go on a trip, and I'm sure you guys go on them too, I don't like going back to the same place twice. I want to go on a circle route. And so they come to Port Alberni, what do they have to do? They got to turn around and go back. Even though they go to Tofino, very nice, but you turn around. So you're doubling the traffic by not having another way out.
So looking back over the last generation, if you look at the population and communities on Vancouver Island, the cities and the towns along the east side of the island have grown quite dramatically, but in Port Alberni, it's been pretty stable. Is it reasonable to say that the fact that we only have one narrow highway into the community has played a role in constricting our population growth?
Ron?
I think that goes without saying. Absolutely. I think if you're a business owner and or an investor, and you're looking at places to invest and build your business, you look at transportation is huge, especially in a manufacturing thing, whether it's small manufacturing or large manufacturing. You've got to have transportation. You have to have guaranteed transportation. And you know what? We can't offer that today. We can't say that highway is going to be open 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year. And we've experienced that with highway closures, with accidents. Part of the highway closures are necessitated by police procedures. They can't reopen the highway until they're finished their investigations anymore. In the old days, they'd open up one lane and still continue their investigations, but they'll actually close the road. You know, so that's saying, you know, I echo what Councillor McClellan says and Jillian here. You've got to have alternatives, and we're talking about trying to build and diversify communities, and tourism is a huge one. You want to be able to offer a good experience for the tourist. And Eric, I agree with you. You know, some of that is white knuckle stuff, but how many times have we followed a tourist on that highway in high tourist season, and you know what? They're on leisure time. Yeah. They're not doing 80 kilometers an hour, they're doing 60 because they're enjoying the scenery, they're on holidays, they're in no hurry to get anywhere, but we want to encourage that. I know it makes many people angry that they can't carry the speed, but it's part of the economy. We need those people in our communities. I agree with Councillor McClellan on the circle route concept. I mean, you go through Banff Jasper, you can circle through onto the Yellowhead down to Calgary. Just about anything has that kind of attraction.
Whenever this conversation comes up locally in the Alberni community, when you're talking about safety on Highway 4, specifically along Cameron Lake, something that I often hear from local people is that these are just people that shouldn't be driving anyway. They don't know how to drive. They should have two hands on the steering wheel. I looked into some ICBC statistics from 2004 to 2013, and there were 11 fatalities between Port Alberni and Coombs. I think that even one fatality is too many and is reason for us to still be seriously looking at safety in Highway 4.
Yeah. So now, as far as even having a secondary highway, what is the feasibility of that? You know, I mean, it sounds like this has been a lot of talk for many years, but how do you get action?
Let's get an update. I was, I believe, Jack and Jillian, you're both members of a transportation committee that has been lobbying for the secondary highway, just to give people a little bit of background, and correct me if any more detail is needed here, but...
Well, we're co-chairs of that committee. The
Yes.
ACRD and the Port Authority are co-sponsors of it.
So this would be the Horn Lake Connector route, which branches off of Highway 4, just outside of Port Alberni, and would go north around Horn Lake and then eventually merge with Highway 19 on the east side of the highway. What would be the benefits of this route?
Well, the benefits are economic and safety. There's as someone was just telling me today, there's 2 brand new hospitals up in Campbell River and Comox, and some of the procedures that we need here are done there now and not in Nanaimo. And so we could go up there straight across and not be held up and really held to ransom whether you get to your medical appointment in Victoria and Nanaimo, but when you're around Cameron Lake and Cathedral Grove when it's shut down. The other benefit is definitely jobs and economics. The 2 forest companies that are in town here, 3 actually that operate logging trucks in and out, have all said that if they could use that road, it would save time on the return trips, and they have less cost for the logs and better chance of the mills staying open here. I don't think it's any secret that the local economy and the forest industry has been on a downturn, and how long any of these international corporations or national are going to keep these mills running has always been a question, and it's becoming a bigger question. But if they could have that road, it would cut their costs down and make it more viable.
So now I have a question with that, because obviously the forestry industry back in the day was doing quite well. Why was this not an option when it was booming?
When it was booming, there was money going everywhere, and the logging shows were right here. We were at over 1,000 people logging in logging camps outside of Port Alberni. 1,000 people working for the pulp mill, 1,000 at Somas, 400 or 500 at APD, and 400 or 500 at Plywoods. And so there was just lots of happening. We were trying to get a different highway then, because the Inland Island Highway, wasn't built. And so if we were to go to Horn Lake then, we'd have to go all the way down that rest of that road. If you notice when the Horn Lake light is, go down to the coast, and that's a long road. Once the Inland Island Highway was built, the Horn Lake connector became viable, very viable. Until then, we were trying to go from the 3 valleys, and Jillian can tell you way more than me on that, from Lake Cowichan to the Alberni Valley to Cumberland, Comox Valley.
How long has the community been considering a secondary highway, Jillian?
Well, if you go way back when the Island Highway was improved, and that happened in the 80s when the mayors on Vancouver Island got fed up because we were not getting any money put into our transportation corridors on the island. The understanding was, because Port Alberni was then looking at another access out of the valley and into the valley for the same reasons as we are today, the understanding was that once they'd done the Island Highway, they would then look at Highway 4 and look at another route, which of course never happened, because it has never been a priority with any government, and that's part of the problem. If they see it as important for whatever reasons, necessity or otherwise, then things get done. And a lot of work has been done over the years on this issue. I mean, it's a huge safety issue for Highway 4 to get that heavy transportation off that highway and make that a secondary road for local traffic and the tourists. And it's a safety issue, and also I think it's an environmental issue. I mean, we've got tankers going around Cameron Lake. That happens to be a pristine lake, really, and you get eventually a truck going in there with oil, and you can see what the problems would be with that. It's
Earlier this year, a truck fell in the lake full of wood chips.
Yeah, it was whether that had been oil or something else toxic. It would have been a disaster.
Yeah, which is ultimately what we're all saying, is that we don't want that disaster to happen before we get it. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So great points. We're just going to cut to break real quick, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Alberni Thrive.
So today we're talking about highway access into the Alberni Valley, and specifically the Horn Lake Connector route. This has been talked about for a long time. I'm aware that last year, when the Ministry of Transportation's 10-year plan was released, there was $100,000 set aside for a business case study to look into the Horn Lake Connector concept and its viability. We are yet to see that business case study. Is there any new information on this project if this could ever be a possibility?
Well, we're waiting. We've been through the process with the ministry. Unfortunately, some of the staff changed, and so they were back to square one. So they said. We looked at the first draft report they sent to us as to their reasons for why they should be doing stuff to Highway 4 and not a secondary highway, and we sent back our answers and questions on some of their decisions or suggestions that the proposals, what they
we
were.
countered the ones that obviously were not helping us.
And they haven't. We were promised that they would get back to us in September, and we're still waiting.
Now that's last September, 2015,
That's
not
last
26,
September.
not 2016.
So now, question: what would you suggest? I mean, obviously, you guys are working really hard to make this happen. You know, what would you suggest for the viewers watching? Can anyone in this area help with this in any way to help have the federal government listen?
It's actually provincial.
Provincial, sorry, I mean provincial, federal. Yeah, no, I know. My bad.
Lobby the minister and ministry. The minister made a public announcement on public television that the next priority for him on Vancouver Island was a Horn Lake connector to Port Alberni, and that took place, I think, last spring or late fall last year, and so we got excited. It doesn't seem to have trickled down through the ministry and the bureaucrats at all. And we've been trying to, people tell me I've got to be polite, so I've been very quiet and waiting for this answer to come. But there's been no answer coming, and I've had several emails in the last 2 months saying it'll be another 2 weeks, another 2 weeks, and another 2 weeks. I've had nothing in the last 3 weeks. So
Frustrating.
I'm hoping that we at least get if they say no, then we got something to start again or to do something. But they haven't said anything. They've hired this consultant and they've paid more than the $100,000 because he had spent that to start with, and they put him back, so they've definitely increased that budget. If they haven't, they've been doing nothing, and I can't say they've done.
Frustrating.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating
Yeah.
because from the port's position, we're looking at trying to get more material across our docks, or be able to bring product in that can go out. And with a better highway corridor, we think our business would improve. And it hamstrings development.
I wonder how viable this highway really is at this point, though. I mean, I've looked in, there have been previous studies about this, and some costs that I've seen have been upwards of $70 million to build this route. And we're seeing investment in highways on Vancouver Island, but it seems like for the most part, that's in the south where there's a higher population. Is it really viable for us to be seriously looking at the Horn Lake Connector right now, or does it make more sense to look at improvements to the existing Highway 4?
Unfortunately, sorry, go ahead.
Well, there are certain areas you can make improvements to parts of the Highway 4, but there are certain areas you cannot make any improvement to, and that's around Cameron Lake. And you know, we're all, as we all say, they're not going to do anything to Cathedral Grove until there's a real disaster. And the same thing's going to happen with Cameron Lake. I mean, supposing a truck with toxic material goes into the lake. I mean, it's not infrequent to hear that someone's gone into the lake. I mean, only last week a vehicle was in the lake. I mean, it could have been a truck with toxic material. It has happened with wood chips before, but I mean, it could be oil, and that would be disastrous, an environmental disaster.
And a PR nightmare for the area. And that's where I'm bringing it into a question to you guys as well. So obviously, this is not an issue just for this municipality. It is an issue for Tofino and for Ucluelet and for even Banff. So I'm just curious, is there talks with Tofino, or has there been any overlapping, you all wanting to work together to get this happening? Just curious if it's just you guys doing it, or if it's also the other municipalities.
The former mayor of Ucluelet was on our transportation committee.
Yeah.
And we just haven't had meetings because it had nothing to meet on, so the present mayor probably would be on it as well. And the regional district includes all of that, and it's a regional district board, it's not just an Alberni Valley board.
Okay.
So, yeah, everyone wants it. It's a simple matter, not a simple matter, it's a definite matter that, like Jillian said, we cannot repair most of that highway. Another one out is really the only answer. And until they do, like you said, Eric, earlier, I don't believe the valley can grow without it. We've now got an airport coming. We've got an aerospace industry that's having trouble attracting people. If they could get supplies to the north easier and so on, we would have a better thing. And there was one thing that, I know, Julian, you mentioned it some time back, there was a windmill they wanted to bring into Port Alberni, the port, and they couldn't because it wouldn't go around Cameron Lake and so on. It was too big a freight. Well, the highways department says, well, I wish you'd quit saying that, because if you'd have phoned us, we'd have shut the highway down at 3 a.m. and taken it across for you. You know, that just doesn't cut it for me.
Well, that was an example of what we couldn't bring in. It would be very difficult to bring in.
When I hear about this issue and when I read about it, it seems to me like it's symptomatic of a bigger issue of Port Alberni and the Alberni Valley not really getting the attention that it deserves for its potential. Do you have any thoughts on that, Ron?
It's politics. It's plain and simple politics. We don't happen to be in a riding that is a riding of the party that's actually in power at the moment, and that's been traditional for the Alberni Valley, and it's a fact of life. And I just wanted to make a comment too about this specific project, but when I've been to Alberni, Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities, and talked to some people from Duncan, and they're wanting to have a bypass around Duncan, and possibly now they're talking about a connector to Banfield through Cowichan Lake and so on. So all of a sudden there's a pushback going, hey, wait a minute. We've got the Horn Lake connector, we've got the Duncan bypass, we want a road to Banfield from basically Victoria and Cowichan. Now they're saying we need to step back. We don't know what's going on behind closed doors in Victoria, but the word that I hear is, okay, we need to develop a Vancouver Island transportation strategy. So they're kind of wanting to take a 30,000-foot view of it, but leaves us in a situation where, and I agree with our other two panelists here, that we're a critical mass here. And something's going to happen. Is it going to take a death or a family to get run over in Cathedral Grove to get action? It's a safety issue, it's serious. I hate to be the glass half empty guy on this, but it's gonna happen. How many times have we been down there? I've been down there and I've seen a truck with full brakes, full bore, trying to get stopped for a family of 5 walking across the highway. Family of 5, I get it, look, buyer beware, but it's gonna happen. It's human error, and it's gonna happen. And I guess I'm sounding a little impassioned at the moment, but it's going to happen. And is that what it's going to have to take?
I feel very strongly about it as well. I drive through Cathedral Grove several times a week in the summer, just exploring the area. What about the idea of just improving the facilities in Cathedral Grove? For example, an overhead bridge going across the road so that people can walk across the bridge. Do you think that would be viable?
Well, it might be a partial a partial improvement for pedestrians tourists at Cathedral Grove, but it doesn't do anything about the problems around Cameron Lake and the fact that you cannot do improvements to Cameron Lake. I drove through there yesterday or the day before, and someone's hit the barricades again round Angel Rock. It's a regular basis. They've got pylons out warning people again. Somebody tell me what you can do with Cameron Lake. Put a bridge across? Yeah. I mean, that's just not viable.
I mean, even if there is a secondary highway out, I mean, Cathedral Grove is still going to be a problem regardless.
Thing, a place,
Yeah.
and an overhead or a tunnel under. You know, the people, most of our population is getting a bit older, so climbing a lot of stairs to go over might not be a big deal to some of them. I've heard that complaint already about that idea, but I don't think it's a bad one. But what it will not do, it will not change the fact that when you come to Port Alberni, you got to go back.
Yeah.
And that is what is stopping business in this town. That's what's stopping the town growing. Before, like when you referred back to when there was lots of loggers and mill workers and lots of money floating around, why didn't it happen? You know, it's now supposed to be happening and it's not, and now we're in trouble.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? Thank you all so much for coming. The half an hour again just flies right by. So yeah, thank you. And hopefully, you know, viewers at home, if this is something that's really passionate to you as well, you know, get involved and let our government know that this is something that's really important for the future of our community.
Call Minister Stone.
Yep, exactly. There you go. You got his phone number?
I
Yeah.
Google.
Oh, whoops. Yeah, just Google. Perfect. But yeah, make sure to check out our website as well. It's www.albernithrive.com.